Hi there, my name is April Sawtell and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing part 2 to the last video I did. I was using shirts, scraps, yardage, fat quarters. I was using a little variety of everything to cut that out. I'm going to link that below. You can jump on there and watch how I cut those out. Okay, so here's what the pieces are behind me. Here are the squares. They're 6.5 inches. And I'm going to start just assembling this. All I'm going to need for today's project, I've got a rotary cutter, an iron, I've got my scissors, I've got pins, my iron and mat, and I've got a couple of rulers. So all I'm going to need the rulers for today is when I go to straighten out this quilt top. That's all I'm going to be showing is the actual quilt top finished. I'm not going to be quilting it, I'm not going to be sandwiching it together. It's just going to be a quilt top all assembled. Okay, let's get started. To know how many blocks you're going to need, I'm just going to show you how I do this. So on my grid paper, all I've got is just these grids. I want my quilt to be about 72 by 78 inches. In order to get that, I'm just going to go across. So if I take 72 and I divide it by, I'm going to say 6 inches because I'll have a 6-inch square after I sew both sides of the seam. I'll have a 6.5-inch square to start, but by the time it's all in the quilt, I'm going to have 6 inches. So I'm just going to take my 72 inches, that's how wide I want the quilt. I'm going to divide it by my 6-inch squares, and that is going to give me, I need 12 squares across. I'm going to do the same thing for the bottom. I know I want my quilt to be 78 inches long. I'm going to divide that by the 6 inches. I'm going to need 13 down. Now, I'm going to take 12 times 13, and that's going to give me 156. That's going to be how many blocks I need for this quilt. I need 156 6.5-inch blocks. You can use this method as well for any size. Just take how wide you want it and how long you want it, and then divide it by the number of the size block you're using. And if you want, just divide it by the block size after you've sewn your 1/4 inch on each side. So you'll have to remove a 1/2 inch. So if you're at 5.5-inch squares, you're going to end up with a 5-inch block. Here's my stack of squares that I've cut. So I have these quilt squares behind me. These are not in any sort of an order in which I'm going to put this together. I'm just going to go at random. I'm going to grab dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, all through the quilt. I'm going to bring this over to the sewing machine, and I'm just going to sew a 1/4 inch right sides together, and I'm going to go 12 across. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you what we're going to do. I'll start out by showing you once I get 12 squares put together. Okay, I'll see you at the sewing machine. I'm just going to start pulling right now from my stack here, and I'm just going to start lining these all up. I'm just going to be lining up the 2 right sides, and then I'm just going to sew a 1/4 inch all the way down. I'm going to go ahead and give a back stitch right here on each end. It just really helps me because it always seems to come apart for me right there. I'm just going to take my painter's tape and I'm going to line up my 1/4 inch. I'm just using my piece and foot, and I'm just going to sew down a 1/4 inch all the way down, and I'm going to give it a back stitch. And then I'm just going to finger press this open. I'm going to do the same thing to all of these. And then I'll just keep sliding it over. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to spread these out a little bit so I can see them, all these squares. My goal is to not have 2 pieces touching, but that very well could happen. What I'm going to try to do when I finger press is I'm going to finger press this whole row to one side. That way when I press it, I'm going to alternate rows, and I'll show you when we get to that. So now I'm on row 2. I'm going to finger press the seam this way. So it's really easy. You just hold your finger there and you pull it over, and it will stay facing that way. Then use your fingers and press it with your finger. I don't care which way my lines go. I have some stripes here, and I don't care if they go this way or this way. So for the most part, for these 6, I started with a solid and I ended with a solid. And for the other 7, I started with a print, ended with a print. That way when I line them up, they're going to line up pretty good. Now, that wasn't the absolute way, that wasn't like 100% that I did it that way, but for the most part, it's going to be that way. So they're going to fall together. They should come together pretty good. So these ones, I'm pushing all in one direction. These ones are all going to go to my right, and the ones that end in the plain ones, I'll do all those to the left. And that way, they should all be able to nest really well. Now, I just put my ironing mat here beside my ironing board, so I could show you, and I can lay this out and just glide right over it. And I'm doing it over here just because of the cameras. I could turn around, but then my cameras are not set up to go over there right at this moment. This still gives me a lot of room to work, so that works fine for me. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set all these ones over here. I'm going to keep them all separated. I'm not ironing to the dark side on these. I'm just doing opposites. One that way, one that way. If you want to, you can lay these all out in a big area that you have so you can see what it's going to look like, and you might want to change it around. I'm just going to start putting mine together now, and in order to do that, I'm going to lay one. I'll start with the solid. You can see how I've got the solids at the end of this one, and I've got the prints at the end of this one. So when I line this up, none of these should match. It may. There's a couple of times that I think I did stick 2 together. That's okay. I didn't go back and rip them out. So I know one seam's going this way and this seam's going that way. So I'm going to start putting these together. And I'm going to nest these seams. So if you've laid this all out and you want to have it in a certain order, all you've got to do is stick a piece of paper on each row. That way you'll know row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4 when you're sewing. In my case right now, it's a whatever goes type of deal. So it doesn't matter which ends up at the top, which ends up at the bottom. I am going to be fine just the way that it lays out. Now every once in a while I'm going to have like a solid and a solid touch-in and a print and a print touch-in. That's okay. I just did this. It was just a rough put the solids at the end of them because they were even numbers. So I knew to put the prints at the end of one row because I had an even number of blocks. I was going 12 across. So it really didn't matter if I could just keep alternating that. But like here, you can see I've got two prints touching each other. That's okay. They don't match. That's really where I was kind of going with this. When I first started sewing them up, I didn't have any order. I was just doing the super scrappy and it was just going to come out however it came out. And then I just realized, oh, I had even numbers. And I thought, well, I have even numbers. I might as well just put solids at the end of this row, prints at the end of this row. Solids at the end, prints at the end. That wasn't what I was trying to do, though. It just came, I just thought of it while I was sewing. So the next time I make anything patchwork, I'm going to always use even numbers because it made it more simple. Then I didn't have to lay it out and make sure no two squares are touching because you've got solid print, solid print, solid print. So for this quilt, that worked out really good, I think. I'll tell you when I'm done. In some of my other tutorials, when I'm doing these, you'll see that I've got an order. Row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, and so on and so forth, just to keep me from not touching multiple squares. I had no order in those particular quilts. Okay, I've got this all pinned. I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch all the way down. I'm going to go ahead and do this to all of the rows. Now I'm just going to sew 1/4 inch all the way down, taking my pins out as I go, and I'm just following my painter's tape here. You can see that my corners match up here. That's why we nest them, and that's what the goal is try to get those so that we'll line right up. Sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. Remember, this doesn't have to be perfect. I certainly am not about perfection at all. I'd like to try. I keep getting better and better as I go, though. You know, you just got to keep practicing. Every time you do it, you get a little bit better. But sometimes your points are not going to be right on. Now, like right here, I could pull this out because this one is quite a bit off. It's just probably how I cut the fabric or something. It wasn't the same. I am not. I am going to leave that. There's no other quilt that's going to have that in it. This is my unique quilt. So I'm going to leave that. I'm going to do this now to all of the pieces. So they'll be all in twos, and then I'll attach all of those twos together. So now I've got that system of solid print for the most part. I don't have it all the way through it. I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to put the opposite now to this piece here. So it will be print, solid. And then I'll match those up. Now I'm just going to take these two pieces and go over the sewing machine, so 1/4 of an inch all the way down. Okay, you're just going to do the same thing. You're going to set your seams, open it up, and then set that seam. And again, just open your seams up over here, just to make sure they're not all crinkled up. Now what we're going to do, we're just going to keep on adding the pieces. Now we're just going to start attaching all these pieces together. This is one area you really want to have your pins. You want these these blocks to kind of line up, at least the best you can. Mine aren't going to be perfect. I'm going to undo this one just because I had two that did match up right there. Just these two were touching each other, and I didn't really want to have that, so we'll swap that one up. So now I've got all my pieces added on. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this in half, and I'm going to bring the corners together. And I'm going to pull this all the way. Shake it out. Then I'm going to come down to the bottom here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab all the corners. I'm going to take my fingers to these folds, just like I'm folding a blanket. Okay, and I'm going to pull it all together, and then I'm just going to shake it out. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to lay this flat. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ruler. You can use your big square ruler if you want to. If it's not long enough, you can use your square, and then you can butt this up to it as well, but a regular ruler. So I've got my ruler nice and straight. I've got everything on the inside of my ruler here. My lines all look straight with my seams. I'm going to cut anything that's on the outside. I'm going through 4 layers here. This is a real easy way to square up your quilt. I have a tutorial I'm going to post below. If you want to go watch that, it'll give full-blown instructions at how to square up your quilt. I'm just doing it real quick right here. Now I'm going to just cut anything that's not under the ruler. You're going to want a nice sharp blade for this too. You're going to need to apply a lot of pressure here because you've got 4 layers you're going through, plus some seams. Okay, and then you're just going to keep pushing your quilt up as you go. Just grab all of your ends, pull that up, and you can flatten it out again. And then just bring your ruler right where you left off. It's nice and straight. And then go ahead and cut off any excess fabric that you have there. It's not a whole ton. And one more time, I'm going to push this up and straighten that out. Again, you can watch the tutorial if you want to watch a full-blown square up of a quilt. Now I'm just going to put my ruler here And I'm nice and straight down here. I'm just going to cut that right off. Okay. And that's all I had to do on that side. Now I'm going to turn this around and I'm going to do the bottom. Here's my two folds. Those are still nice and straight together. And I'm going to pull this back down. I'm going to flatten it out. I'm just going to readjust a little bit here. Pull my 4 points together. Grabbing the inside and the outside. And I'm going to just turn it. And you're going to do the same thing. And for this demonstration, I'm still going to just use my long ruler because I'm working in a very small space. I use that big one if I have the quilt laid out, full-blown laid out, and then I'll use the square. So for right now, this is all I need. I'm going to bring my top to the top here. Make sure my top's on a line so I have something straight to go by. Find my innermost spot that I need to cut off. And I'm just looking to see if my lines are a little bit straight here on each block. It's going to vary there. It just depends how big your 1/4 inch is and if you got a little wonky. So really what I'm focusing on is the innermost piece, making sure I cut out any overhang. There's not a whole lot here. And this will vary depending on how big your 1/4 inch seam was as you were sewing. Look, right there was really just not much at all. I'm going to pull this up. And I'm just going to line my ruler up again. I'm just lining it up on this nice straight edge there. Making sure all of anything I'm cutting is outside of the ruler. And just push down and cut. And I've got one more time I need to push this up. And there's very little down here. Line my ruler, and I see a little bit right here on the edge, and I can see I'm nice and straight down here on the bottom of my quilt. Straight over here on the edges. And just cut that off. And now my 4 points are perfectly together. And this is what I've got left of that too. So now you've got your 4 points all nice and straight. Just like when you fold a blanket, you want them to all come together. And then if you want, you can just shake this off because you're going to have loose threads. So it's as easy as that. I absolutely love how it came out. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time. Remember to keep it simple. Have a nice day. Thanks for watching. Bye. Bye, little Miss Ready Thready.